Marcus tossed his expensive watch onto the kitchen counter, sneering. I'm leaving you for Ashley. The house is mine, so don't even ask. I sipped my coffee and smiled. Check again. His smug expression faltered. My name is Olivia, and at 35, my husband of 12 years was leaving me for a 23-year-old. But I wasn't begging him to stay. What do you mean? He demanded. I set my mug down. Just suggesting you check your facts. His eyes narrowed. Don't play games. Ashley is young, exciting. Everything you're not. And this house? It's mine. Always has been. I watched him strut around, so sure of himself. You know what your problem is, Olivia? You got boring. Ashley supports my dreams. You mean your real estate project? I asked. His face twitched, but he quickly recovered. Exactly. She believes in me, unlike you. You always played it safe. Like when I questioned your land deal last year. That deal will make me millions, he snapped. I walked to our home office, and he followed. Practical, I mused. Like keeping copies of all our financial records. Like hiring a private investigator. He hesitated. What? I turned to face him. Did you think I didn't know? About Ashley? The money? Her sudden promotion? His face paled. You're bluffing. Am I? I opened my laptop. Remember those bank papers you had me sign? His confidence cracked. Those were routine updates. I smirked. No, they were transfer papers. You tried to move our joint assets into your account, but I signed decoys. That's impossible, he whispered. Did you forget? I was a financial fraud investigator before we married. He grabbed the laptop, his hands shaking. These must be fake. They're real, just like the proof of your fraud and embezzlement. He slammed the laptop shut. You can't prove anything. I walked to the safe, opened it, and pulled out a folder. Would you like to see the photos first or the bank records? This is ridiculous. He turned toward the door. Ashley is waiting for me. I raised an eyebrow. She might be rethinking things. She called last week, after a talk with her boss about company policies on office relationships. His face went ashen. His perfect plan was crumbling. What do you want? He finally asked. I sat down, crossing my legs. Now that's the right question. Let's talk about what happens next. Marcus realized too late he had underestimated me, and now his world was about to change in ways he never expected. The next morning, I sat across from my lawyer, Sarah, watching her review the evidence I gathered. Her office was quiet except for the occasional rustle of papers and her soft whistles of appreciation. This is incredible, Olivia, she said, looking up from the documents. You've built an airtight case. The financial records, the surveillance photos, the witness statements from his coworkers. It's all here. I nodded, thinking about Marcus's face when he'd slunk out of the house last night, tail between his legs. He tried calling Ashley immediately, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Apparently, the anonymous tip about her involvement in financial irregularities had already reached her supervisor. What happened after you confronted him? Sarah asked, organizing the papers into neat piles. He tried to backtrack, of course. Claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that Ashley meant nothing to him. I smiled, remembering his desperate attempts to regain control of the situation. Then he tried threatening me, said no one would believe me, that he'd deny everything. Sarah raised an eyebrow. And I played him the recording of our conversation from last night. Turns out my phone catches audio quite clearly when it's sitting on the kitchen counter. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. We need to talk. Please, I'll do anything. I showed it to Sarah, who smirked. They always want to talk once they realize they've lost the upper hand. What are you thinking? I leaned back in my chair, considering my options. I want him to understand exactly what he's losing. Not just the house or the money, but everything he's built. His reputation, his career, his future. With this evidence, Sarah said, tapping the folders, we can make that happen. The company's board will be particularly interested in these financial records. And once they start investigating, his whole house of cards will collapse. I finished. Another text from Marcus. Ashley's not answering my calls. What did you do? I smiled, thinking of the anonymous email I'd sent to Ashley's department head, detailing the suspicious timing of her promotion and certain financial transactions. Nothing explicitly incriminating, just enough to raise serious questions. Did you know, I told Sarah, That Ashley's been telling everyone at their office that Marcus was separated, that I was the bitter ex who wouldn't let go. I shook my head. She had no idea she was just another pawn in his game. Sarah started laying out documents for me to sign. The board meeting is tomorrow morning. Once they see these records, Marcus's career at the company will be over, I said quietly. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, exactly. More like vindication. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Ashley. We need to talk. Marcus says you're trying to ruin everything. He says you're lying about the money. I showed Sarah the message. Should I respond? Not yet, she advised. Let them stew. They'll both be getting calls from HR soon anyway. As if on cue, my phone lit up with a call from Marcus's office number. I let it go to voicemail. Tell me about the house, Sarah said, moving on to another folder. You said you had the deed transferred? I nodded, pulling out the property documents. Marcus never read anything I put in front of him carefully. Too busy planning his next conquest, I suppose. Last month, I had him sign transfer papers buried in a stack of routine documents. Clever, Sarah commented, and completely legal since he signed willingly. He always underestimated me, I said softly. Thought I was just the boring wife who kept his life running smoothly. He never realized I was protecting myself all along. My phone buzzed with another message from Marcus. The board wants to see me tomorrow morning. What have you done? Sarah watched me read the message. Are you sure you want to go through with this? We can negotiate a quieter settlement. I thought about all the nights I'd spent alone while Marcus was with Ashley, all the times he dismissed my concerns about his risky financial decisions, all the years he'd taken me for granted. No, I said firmly, he needs to face the consequences of his actions. All of them. Just then, an email notification popped up on my phone from Ashley's work account. I just got called into HR. They're asking questions about my promotion. Please tell me you didn't send them anything. Marcus says you're trying to destroy us. Destroy them? I showed Sarah the email. They did that to themselves. Sarah gathered the documents into her briefcase. The board meeting is at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Are you ready for what comes next? I thought about Marcus's face when he realized how thoroughly I'd documented everything. The panic in his eyes when he understood that his perfect plan was falling apart. More than ready, I replied. They never saw me coming because they never really saw me at all. Tomorrow, that changes. As I left Sarah's office, my phone lit up with messages from both Marcus and Ashley, each more desperate than the last. They were finally realizing that their actions had consequences, that the comfortable life they'd planned together was crumbling. I drove home to our house, my house now, and walked through the rooms that held so many memories. Marcus had always treated our marriage like a convenience, something he could discard when something better came along. He never understood that while he was plotting his escape, I was quietly building my fortress. Tomorrow, the board would see the evidence. Tomorrow, Marcus and Ashley would face questions they couldn't answer. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, I sat in my quiet kitchen, sipping tea and reading the increasingly frantic messages appearing on my phone. Each one showed me how deeply I'd shaken their confidence, how thoroughly I'd disrupted their plans. Please, Marcus's latest text read, we can work this out. I'll give you anything you want. I smiled, thinking of the evidence safely stored in Sarah's office. You already have, I whispered to myself. You just didn't know it. The board meeting was everything I expected and more. I sat quietly in the back of the conference room, watching Marcus sweat through his expensive shirt as the directors reviewed the evidence. Mr. Parker, the board chairman's voice cut through the tense silence. Would you care to explain these financial discrepancies? Marcus tugged at his collar, his usual confidence nowhere to be seen. There's been a misunderstanding. I can explain everything. Please do, the chairman replied coldly. Start with explaining why company funds were redirected to personal accounts and how Ms. Thompson received a senior position despite having no qualifications. In the corner, Ashley sat pale and rigid, her youth suddenly a liability rather than an asset. She wouldn't meet anyone's eyes, especially not Marcus's pleading looks in her direction. Marcus started, then stopped. For the first time in our marriage, he was speechless. The evidence spoke for itself. Unauthorized transfers, fabricated reports, and a clear pattern of financial manipulation. Every document was meticulously organized, every transaction traced to its source. Given the severity of these allegations, the chairman continued, the board has no choice but to terminate your employment effectively immediately. Ms. Thompson, the same applies to you. Ashley burst into tears. Marcus just sat there, staring at the table as his carefully constructed world crumbled around him. After the meeting, I found him sitting alone in the lobby, head in his hands. He looked up as I approached, his face a mask of defeat. Why? He asked hoarsely. Why did you do this? I didn't do this, Marcus. You did. Every choice, every lie, every betrayal, those were all yours. I just made sure you couldn't hide them anymore. He stood up, desperation in his eyes. The house, we can still work something out. I'll sign whatever you want. The house is already mine, I reminded him, and there's nothing left to work out. Olivia, please, he grabbed my arm. I've lost everything. I gently removed his hand. No, Marcus, you threw everything away. There's a difference. As if on cue, Ashley stormed past us, mascara streaking her face. You ruined everything, she shouted at Marcus. You said you had it all under control. I watched their final argument unfold in the corporate lobby, neither of them even noticing me slip away. Outside, Sarah was waiting by her car. How did it go? She asked, though her smile suggested she already knew. Exactly as expected, I replied. The board found everything they needed in those files. And Marcus, currently discovering that his young girlfriend isn't interested in an unemployed, disgraced ex-executive. Sarah laughed. What's next for you? I looked up at the bright sky, feeling lighter than I had in years. I think it's time for a vacation. The house has a beautiful view, perfect for watching sunsets and planning new beginnings. Later that evening, as I sat on my patio enjoying a glass of wine, my phone lit up with one final text from Marcus. I understand now. I'm sorry I never saw you clearly before. I didn't respond. Some revelations come too late, and some apologies matter less than the lessons learned. Instead, I watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, thinking about how sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else's world. It's about rebuilding your own stronger than before. Marcus had thought he was writing the end of our story when he chose Ashley. Instead, he'd only written the end of his chapter in my life. My story was just beginning, and this time, I was the only one holding the pen. The next morning, I woke up to news that Marcus had left town, his dreams of real estate empire building shattered along with his reputation. Ashley had already updated her LinkedIn profile, carefully omitting her brief tenure at the company. As for me, I had a house with a view, a future full of possibilities, and a satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the best response to betrayal isn't anger or vengeance. It's simply showing them exactly who they underestimated. I picked up my coffee and stepped out onto the patio, breathing in the fresh morning air. The garden needed attention, and I had plans for renovating the kitchen. Small changes perhaps, but they would make this place truly mine. Life has a way of teaching us the lessons we need to learn, even when they come wrapped in painful packages. Marcus had taught me that I was stronger than I knew, more capable than he'd ever given me credit for. And that perhaps was the greatest gift he'd ever given me, even if he'd never meant to. The house, my future, my life, they were all mine now, earned through careful planning and quiet strength. Sometimes the best victories are the ones no one sees coming, especially from the woman they thought they could leave behind.